A couple of weeks ago, I commented on the statements of the Bishop of Essen in Germany, one of the most ardent defenders of the German Synod, who said that when the theses that they defend are imposed in the Church, and he is convinced that it will be so, those of us who want to be faithful to the Word of God and to tradition will have to think what to do. And he gave two alternatives. Either we leave the Church as heretics, or we stay in the Church accepting all that for him is the definite future, and that constitutes the new Church. This week, the president of the German bishops, Monsignor Martin, said something similar. He said, first, that in his diocese and in the majority of the German dioceses, the norms of the synod will be applied. For example, the one that establishes that homosexual couples and any other type of couple that is not married by the Church must be blessed, first. And second, he has said, and this is very significant, that his conscience as a bishop prevents him from allowing the Church to become a small and isolated sect. Select a minority that lives closed in on itself and oblivious to the needs of the world. A small and isolated sect. That is what for Monsignor Martin we are, or will be, those of us who, I repeat, want to remain faithful to the Word of God and to tradition. Both he and the majority of the German bishops, and not only them, because the German bishops have the virtue of coming forward and saying what they think. You can see them coming. Many others, a lot of them, think the same or something very similar. And I am not only referring to priests and religious. They are absolutely convinced that these theses they defend are not only the best, but that they are the ones that will be imposed. Although it seems to me that they have already ruled out that this is not going to happen during this pontificate. But they are convinced that this is the future, and that therefore, when it is applied, we will have to choose between leaving the Church, as Martin says, as a small minority, select sect that lives isolated from the world and closed in on itself. Either we accept what they propose, or we will have to live as a despicable small minority sect. It is a pity that Monsignor Martin says this, because he forgets or seems to forget that in its origin and for a very long time, Christians were a small and minority sect. That is, we were a small group, persecuted, many times on the verge of extinction, and yet, despite that, they grew. And they did so precisely because they did not accept to be assimilated by the world around them. The first Christians were a small group which did spread rapidly throughout the empire, but as a very small group in a pagan context that had nothing to do in many respects with what they believed and defended, and they preferred to be a small closed group in itself, faithful to its founder, rather than let themselves be assimilated by the world, which is what the German bishops are proposing. Because that small initial Christian sect was very clear that they had to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, and that they were in the world, but they did not have to be in the world. Were they closed in on themselves? Did they live for themselves, having firmly established their doctrine? Yes, but at the same time, they were open to the world, not to let themselves be assimilated, but to evangelize that world, because they were aware that what they had was the treasure, and that they had to give it to those who were dying because they did not have that treasure. The contempt that Monsignor Baxin's words show towards the small sect, according to him, who are faithful to the word of God and tradition, is also a contempt for that first Christian community that he says he is not capable of, that his conscience as a bishop prevents him from doing so, because he is despising, for example, the great martyred bishops, Saint Ignatius of Antioch, Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, not to mention the holy apostles. The most curious thing about this situation is that while they say these things, and they are absolutely convinced that the future is theirs, and that we are going to become a closed and isolated minority sect that has no future, and that will be expelled from the church. At the same time, they are giving their numbers that are terrible. It is an official data of the Diocese of Essen in Germany that only 2.4% of the Catholics of the diocese go to Mass on Sunday. That is 97.6% of the Catholics of the Diocese of Essen never go to Mass. Is that not a minority? But the minority, which I do not know if it is a select one, that minority has occurred while their bishop, and I suppose a significant part, if not all, of their priests have opted for assimilation into the world. They themselves say that by the year 2040, there will be no more than 30 priests, and it is even possible that it will be surplus, because if today there are 2.4% of practitioners, by 2040 there will probably be 1.5 or less. They consider that they are the future and that the others will be the minority, but they are already the minority. They who have adapted to the world are already the minority. Do they not see that those who do not follow their advice, others, do they not see that they are more successful? They do not see that they resist much better the fierce attacks of the secularized world. I have the impression that there will be nothing left of them. One that remains, the last one that remains, will continue to say, "We are the future," or "He is the future." We are the future, and you are going to disappear. But if they are already nothing, I repeat, 97.6% of the Catholics of the Diocese of Essen never go to Mass, and this small minority, led by pastors who have given themselves fully to assimilation with the world, dare to say that the rest of us are going to become a minority. But if they are already a minority, what advice do they have to give to the others when they have failed? And they have failed not because they are a minority, but because they have adapted to the world. All this reminds me of an old saying: God blinds those who want to lose. They are full of arrogance, a feeling of superiority. They believe that they are the ones who have to lead the world church into the future. What the rest of the world may think does not matter to them, because they are absolutely convinced that they are right. And it does not even matter that reality contradicts them. I do not know if God blinds those who want to lose, as the saying goes, but in this case, they have blinded themselves, and have become blind guides leading other blind people. Until next week, God willing.